That's Jimmy Stein. I'm Clint Lamb, and this is the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. Jimmy, as expected, Alabama came out of the weekend with a victory over Eastern Illinois, 56-0. I don't know if there's a whole lot that you can take away from this. Now, there's going to be some things to talk about, 100%. But at the same time, from like a defensive perspective, they went above and beyond. Like, there was only so much you were going to be able to take away from this performance, but they made sure everybody understood this was a dominant defensive performance. This wasn't just going against an FCS opponent, holding your opponent to 34 total yards, 0 points. I mean, I don't even know how many positive plays they had, but it wasn't many. I feel like it was like a handful. Defense did its job. But overall, before we get into that specifically, let's talk about just some of your initial takeaways from the game.
Yeah, it has to start with defense. Like you said, Alabama now leads the SEC in total defense. Obviously, when you have a game that has that sort of statistical, uh, imbalance, it can really skew things. But I don't think it takes away from the fact that Alabama can now argue that they're the best defensive team in this league. I would rank them second myself. I would still put Oklahoma first based on what Oklahoma has done against really good competition. But the fact that you're number one or number two in this league in total defense or in defense alone, just amazing performance by the defense to give up nothing. Nothing. They gave up nothing. I think they had like a 15-yard pass play once, and their leading rusher rushed for 25 yards, and it was on like 13 carries. They just gave up nothing, despite playing a ton of players. They played like well over 40 players on defense, and it didn't matter. They still gave up nothing. I mean, Deontay Lawson, Justin Jefferson played about 7 snaps between the two of them, and they still gave up nothing. So shout out to Kane Womack. And I've had my doubts. I've had my criticisms. I mean, I don't like some things that Kane Womack does in terms of how many players he plays and the packages and just the style, this vision defense and a lot of zone, looking at the quarterback stuff. All that stuff I've had questions about. I mean, I question it. But at the same time, the results have to matter, and the results have been outstanding. I said last year, this was the best defense at Alabama since 2017. This year's defense is better than last year's. I mean, this is 2 years in a row of a top 10 defense nationally, in my opinion, and the best defenses Alabama's fielded since roughly 2017. So I give Kane Womack a ton of credit. Offensively, this team, despite 56 points and never punting, they never punted. I think they didn't make a fourth down once, so I guess that sort of counts like a punt to some extent. But despite all that, Clint, I mean, I think there are legitimate offensive questions going into Auburn, and that's what has to be addressed this week on the practice field, and certainly has to be addressed at Jordan-Hare next Saturday.
Yeah, now it's for everything, right? And I mean, your entire season is now on the line. We're going to be talking about that this week. You're going to be talking about it a lot. There's a lot to talk about because it's not just the X's and O's. It's the meaning behind a lot of this, what it means for Auburn, what it means for Alabama, what it means for this state moving forward, coaching searches. There's just a lot on the line for both programs and for both coaches. And, so a lot of conversation, but I agree with you. We're not really going to do this like an offense, defense, break it up into two. I don't think it's worth doing that, to be honest. We're going to leave it to one, but we're going to have this conversation, and we're going to be also dabbling in some other things just about the team in general, like biggest rest of season concerns or things that might be encouraging or whichever direction we want to take it. But when watching the game, I mean, it was clear that everything that we thought about Eastern Illinois' offense was accurate. They absolutely no success. Didn't matter who you put out there. I mean, walk-ons at the end of the game were making plays. I mean, it was that type of lopsidedness. But what I will say is you did see a bunch of guys play well. I mean, you can't ignore that. Tim Keenan adding 2 sacks to his season total, that's great. I thought that really, you look at Edric Hill, I thought he looked good. I thought James Smith looked good. So the interior, as expected against this type of opponent, very, very good. it was great to see Quay Russaw back out there. And let's actually look at I don't know exactly how many snaps he ended up playing. Do you have it off the top of your head?
It wasn't a lot, but it was, wasn't just getting his feet wet. And obviously he's got to split snaps there with Yanze Pierre, Justin Hill, and Noah Carter. So I don't remember off the top of my head. I would guess 10 to 15. Does that sound about right?
7. It was lower than I
7.
thought too. I would have
7.
thought
Okay.
10.
Yeah.
That was the number I was going to go with.
Yeah. So it wasn't a lot, but it was significant that he played, and I think you will see him against Auburn. There's no reason to make a change there. I mean, Yanze Pierre is one of the best defensive players, not just on this team, but in this league. So I think Yanze Pierre, for now, is the quote every down wolf. But no, Kane substitutes a lot. Quay Russaw will play. There may even be packages against Auburn. They run the ball quite a bit, and particularly with Ashton Daniels and Deuce Knight. There's going to be a lot of quarterback runs, regardless of which quarterback plays. You could see some packages that have both Quay Russaw and Yanze Pierre on the field at the same time. I think you're more likely to see those 3 inside linebacker packages at the same time, where you have Justin Jefferson and Nakia Hill-Green inside and Deontay Lawson sort of shifting outside. But Yanze Pierre could be out there too. So I think we'll see Russaw against Auburn. I don't think it's so significant that it's like, okay, Pierre back to the bench, Russaw plays. I don't think it'll be that at all. Pierre's just been too good, and Russaw still knocking the rust off. So I think we'll see him some. It wouldn't surprise me if it's just in that 7 to 14 or 15 snap range again.
Yeah, and I do think you see a rotation. I do think this is exactly what you wanted from Quay Russaw because he looked good. Everybody looked good, so that's not surprising. But he was moving extremely well and setting a hard edge. Didn't seem to be having any trouble with that. So that was all encouraging. I also want to point out too, like they had 3 sacks, and a lot of people's like, "Hey, that's fine," but that's not they threw the ball 9 times. That's a 33.3% sack rate when the other team drops back to throw a pass. I mean, granted, I say drops back to throw a pass. It might not be there because they only attempted 9, but they could have dropped back, and then obviously you had sacks and things like that contributed. But the rate was really, really high, like fewer than 10 pass attempts the entire game, and you had 3 sacks. So 2 of those came from Tim Keenan, the other from Bray Hubbard. They were extremely aggressive against 12 personnel. Like after the turnover, the first interception by Ty Simpson, and they were in the red zone, you could tell what they thought because of how they were playing, putting tons of bodies on the line of scrimmage. They were bringing heat. They really felt like, hey, we can get some negative plays and put them out of field goal range. And that's exactly what they did. So they felt in complete control. Now, here's what I will say. I approached this game, and I brought this up after it, but I approached this game thinking this is a great opportunity to get some confidence building for certain guys, whether it be Ty Simpson, whether it be, Quay Russaw getting some confidence back in, post injury and doing some of those things. I don't think that was the goal of the coaching staff. Like this wasn't a, hey, let's go out there and have Ty Simpson throw for 300 yards, or 220 on like 17 attempts or 15 attempts and 3 or 4 touchdowns and, really pad his numbers. Now, what I will say is that tells me a lot about Ty Simpson because he had no interest in doing that. Even at the end of the half, when they're trying to score a touchdown before the half, he makes that throw. And I think, I guess it was Kalen DeBoer. We'll hear, I guess, from Ryan Grubb and them today. But Kalen DeBoer mentioned that he was willing to throw the pass and risk an interception in that situation rather than taking a check down and getting some chunk yardage to pad his own stats. I think that was Ty Simpson's approach. I don't think he cared about his numbers at all. He wanted to, whatever they were wanting to work on going into this game, which in my opinion, running the football. You're struggling to run it. Hey, let's run it 50 times in this game. Let's get some good practice reps. This is essentially, no offense to Eastern Illinois, but this is a practice squad across from us. Let's get a solid day of practice in where you're getting everybody reps. I mean, on the offensive line, at running back, whatever, tight end. And let's see if we can't start getting this run game fixed. I'm not saying that it was fixed or is fixed as a result. They did run for, 269 yards and 8 touchdowns. You're only going to take away so much from that. But what it did tell me was there was a great day of practice for them on that front. And considering what we started to see, which I thought was encouraging against Oklahoma, maybe you're starting to see this run game take a step in the right direction, not towards being super effective or super consistent yet, but at least starting to make steps in the right direction again compared to the last several games where it was starting to regress a little bit.
Yeah, several interesting things in the run game to me was how they spread it out. But how about this? I mean, AK Deer played in the first quarter. Now, I know you're substituting a lot, but he played in the first quarter. I definitely noticed that. And hey, I'm going by nothing but talent evaluation, watching the running backs perform in this game. I, I think AK Deer is the most gifted kid that they have back there. I think he's going to be really good once he learns how to be a college SEC running back. He's still learning, still developing there. But I thought in terms of pure talent, he was the best kid they put on the field. The run game was obviously better. Now, I joked going into Eastern Illinois, hey, can you even run the ball against them, as a way to, point out that it's been a struggle, and I needed to see it work against anyone before I really believed that would happen. But they did run the ball well. They looked a lot better. Again, obviously, you have to take into account the opponent. Against Auburn, Clint, I don't think it's going to be a situation where they're going to show up at Jordan Hare and rush for 200 yards. As a matter of fact, I'll be pretty stunned if they get around 150, 160. Let's remember Auburn is very good defensively. I think, I said Alabama leads the SEC in total defense. Auburn is eighth. And hey, dead in the middle in the SEC means you're really good. I mean, that's good to be eighth in the SEC. So this is a good defense that you're going to play. I don't think it's going to be a rush for 200 yards, but Alabama doesn't have to do that to be successful. To be really successful on offense, the run game has to be a legit threat. They have to defend it. They have to not worry, but they have to go, well, Alabama can run the ball on us and move the chains running the ball. So Auburn has to commit to defending it. If they commit to defending the run, then life gets so much easier for Ty Simpson and those receivers, because that's how you're going to win the game at Auburn, Ty and the receivers. But the run game has to be a threat. If it's not, like, for instance, Oklahoma, I think, they defended Alabama extremely well, because I don't think that they committed to, okay, well, we got to shut down the Alabama run. I think they committed to shutting down the short intermediate pass. And that's where Alabama has made its hay all year long, and it definitely produced more 3 and outs, than we've seen, all year. But if you make advances in the run game, if you get better in the run game, then I don't think Auburn can defend you the same way. And I'm expecting to see a really solid offensive performance, Clint, at Jordan Hare. Solid in the sense that I think that the run game has improved from what we saw at Oklahoma, from what we saw Eastern Illinois. If Alabama can get up in that 120, 130, 140 range running the ball, I think that makes Ty and the receivers that much more dangerous.
Yeah, they're tied for 11th nationally in run defense. So really, really good on that front. Now, something I wanted to bring up, and hopefully I don't screw this up. So Jam Miller, I put this on Twitter, and this, to me, it really paints the picture. In the first 3 games that he played in, which were 3 SEC games, it was Georgia, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. He had 58 carries for 267 yards. He was averaging 4.6 yards per carry. He had a rushing touchdown, and he also had 8 catches for 52 yards. So he was averaging over 100 total yards, 106.3 total yards per game in those 3 contests. And he left the Missouri game earlier due to the concussion. In the last 4 SEC games, so not including Eastern Illinois, he's totaled 39 carries, 81 yards, averaging just 2.1 yards per carry, 1 touchdown, 8 catches for 44 yards, and he's averaging 31.3 yards per game. Now, for anybody that might say, okay, run defense, did it have anything to do with the opponents? Like, maybe you just hit a good stretch there to start, but if you actually look at that, Georgia currently has the number 5 ranked run defense. Vanderbilt sits at 20. Missouri sits at 22. So that is 3 top 25 run defenses that Jam Miller played in his first 3 games. Since then, Tennessee ranks number 42, South Carolina 46, LSU 31, and Oklahoma number 3. So he has played just 1 top 25 defense in those 4 games. So really the opponents have gotten easier, and yet he has regressed. I don't know if it's concussion related. But what I will say is it is a stark difference pre-concussion compared to post-concussion for Jam Miller. I really think that they were expecting to get a lot more out of him this season. And I don't know if the two things are related or if just for whatever, there was a different reason he started to regress, but they have not gotten out of him what they needed to, which I think, that is really, of all the factors involved, I think that has probably set back the run game probably more than anything, in the sense of based off of what they were expecting versus what they've gotten.
Yeah, that tweet, boy, that was super interesting, and that's such the shocking numbers. Two text threads that I'm in sent me that tweet before we did the show today. So your tweet's been making the rounds, but yeah, 2 different text threads I'm in. Like, have y'all seen this? Yeah, it's shocking to me his numbers have been cut by his production is down 70%. 70% with the numbers Clint just shared. Why? I have a hard time believing that the concussion alone is responsible, but I can easily believe it's partly responsible. I tend to think whenever that there's kind of a complex issue that it's kind of requires a complex answer, and there's not just a simple answer like, oh, it's the concussion. Now, I do think, no doubt, the numbers are so stark. The concussion and the health have to be a part of this answer. It has to be. As to what percentage, I don't know, but it's got to be the starting point. But the Alabama, it's not like, I also think it's bigger than Jam in this sense. If it was just Jam's concussion, then you'd probably have Kevin Riley or Daniel Hill putting up good numbers, but they're not. They're not either. So I think it's bigger than Jam, in terms of why hasn't Alabama run the ball better. But with Jam, it's clearly related to health, or starts there. But the run game issues go beyond Jam's health, because, like I said, Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley would have better numbers, and they don't. Their numbers aren't really any better than Jam's. But Jam's production falling off to that point, it's clear he struggled coming back from the injury. That's crystal clear based on your numbers.
And here's the thing: he didn't struggle coming back from the collarbone injury. So, he gets back in Georgia, top 5 run defense. Makes sense that you saw some good things on tape. And we said after that game, and we had said really as he continued on, we're like, he actually showed some encouraging things. The run game showed some encouraging things against Georgia. So even though the yards per carry and everything wasn't great, since he had gotten back for those 3 games until that concussion, he actually was being productive. Now, what I say is that the biggest difference comes down to Jam. It was based off of, I think, what the coaching staff was expecting to get. I'm not saying, yes, the offensive line to an extent. I don't think they thought they were going to struggle to sustain blocks and do some of those things as much as they have. So I do think that's another factor. But when you heard them talking about the run game all offseason, it was Jam Miller, and it was glowing reviews. It was the type of reviews that reflected what you saw in those first 3 games back. That was the player we were all expecting, and he was carrying Alabama's run game, and it was a very strong complementary piece, and it was providing Ty Simpson in the passing game a lot. And then that concussion happens, and then he falls by the wayside. They have to start turning to some other guys like Daniel Hill. I heard great things about him in the spring, but there were clearly some consistency issues throughout the offseason for him. He's had some consistency issues this season. It's been on display, so it hadn't been overly surprising. Granted, he was also a little bit banged up in the offseason. That kind of lingered or carried over into the season some, so that certainly impacted things. But Kevin Riley, he comes out of nowhere. You're expecting Richard Young to be one of those guys. You're not expecting A.K. Deere. You're expecting Draylon Washington to. Washington doesn't play. Richard Young doesn't play. Kevin Riley plays a little bit. So it becomes Daniel Hill and Jam Miller. But Daniel Hill, I think to this point, has kind of given them in a lot of ways what they were expecting. Like with him, I talked about a lot. I thought his ability to consistently get 4 or 5 yards for the offense is where I thought he could really make his mark. He's not going to be some explosive back that's going to rip off huge chunks, but he's going to consistently put you in favorable situations. He hadn't done it to the extent that they were hoping or wanting, but they avoided negative plays running the football against Oklahoma. And I think that Daniel Hill's power and the ability to carry guys certainly helped in that instance. But Jam, that's why I say he's been the biggest contributing factor to this, is just simply you heard it. I mean, and like I said, Ryan Grubb was asked about the run game at one point in the offseason, I think in fall camp. His response, Jam Miller. And then he just like was all about it. And then the injury happened. They didn't really have a run game. Jam Miller gets back. Now all of a sudden for a while they have a run game. He suffers a concussion. They no longer have a run game. So that's why I say I think that he actually has played a massive part in this. And I don't think it's necessarily his fault.
No. It's not his fault. And of course the health isn't his fault. And what's going on around him isn't his fault. The drop off is just stark. I mean, over 100 yards per game rushing and receiving is great production. I mean, it's great, but 30 yards a game from your starting running back, rushing and receiving, is paltry. I mean, it's just not. It's well below it's just substandard. It's not going to work, and it really tells a lot of the story about how Alabama really, for a while now, has been a one-dimensional football team. They weren't against Eastern Illinois. Notice I think they threw for 270 and rushed for 269 against Eastern Illinois. That's about as balanced as it gets, but this has not been a balanced football team, certainly since the concussion to Jam Miller. It's just clearly, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. Why is it? I think it's a few things, and I think we saw one of them this weekend. One thing that's interesting to me about the Cuevas injury that is no doubt a blow. That's a blow. I'm not trying to say, hey, this is all good news. No, it's terrible news. Josh Cuevas is one of the best football players on the team, and I think, we haven't heard from DeBoer specifically on this, but I think it would be almost shocking if Cuevas is back this week. I know as we record this, I don't expect that at all. I mean, I have like a 0% hope that that's going to be the case. Now, we might hear something later this week that changes that, but I don't think so. But my point about losing Cuevas was this, Clint, is that I wondered if we might see more 12 personnel with Cuevas out, because you can't really replace him with one guy. There's only one guy on the team whose skill set is a lot like Cuevas, and to me, that's Marshall Pritchett. And we did see Marshall Pritchett. We saw him a ton. As a matter of fact, I believe Marshall Pritchett played more snaps than any other tight end on the roster this past Saturday. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's like, well, we lost Cuevas. Here's the next Cuevas is Marshall. But you're not going to start him and play him at the Y. That's asking way too much. So to play Pritchett, you almost have to play Caleb Edwards too. And we did see Caleb Edwards start. As a matter of fact, they came out in 12 personnel. It was the first snap. It's the number one thing I was looking for. They came out in 12 personnel, but it wasn't Caleb Edwards and Marshall Pritchett. It was Caleb Edwards and Jay Lindsey, who's going to end up playing, I think, a few more snaps with Cuevas out. So they were sort of, I wouldn't say committed to 12 personnel, but they started out with it. And again, this team hadn't played a lot of 12, particularly compared to last year this season. But they did play with it some, and Marshall Pritchett was out there. Again, if you're going to play Pritchett, it's probably a 12 personnel thing, because if you're just playing Pritchett and there's not another tight end with him, then Pritchett's playing at the line of scrimmage. I don't know that he's ready for that, and the Alabama run game has been too questionable to depend on that. But if you want to replace Cuevas with Pritchett, you got to play two. That's what I was looking at, and that's sort of what happened. It'll be really interesting to see if that continues to happen at Auburn. Are we really going to play true freshman Marshall Pritchett, who was on his way to a red shirt? Are we really going to play him a ton with the season on the line at Auburn in that atmosphere? My guess is yes. I think he's ready for this. And again, not Cuevas, but pretty good. And I think we see this more 12 personnel, more Caleb Edwards, more Jay Lindsey. And you know what? I won't be surprised, Clint, if Alabama runs the ball better against Auburn than they have these last 3 or 4 SEC games, specifically because they're doing something different at tight end, going with 2 tight ends and having Edwards and Lindsey out there as opposed to Cuevas at the Y, which just isn't ideal.
Here's the thing about like 12 personnel versus like 11 personnel. The NFL is doing this a lot right now. They give you 11 personnel, which will cause the opposing defense to go more of a nickel package. They won't be in their base 4-3 or 3-4 looks. And then what the NFL has started to trend towards is running the football a lot out of 11 personnel. They let the defense put their nickel package out there, and then they do condensed formations and different things in order to run the football. Then they'll go 12 personnel and they'll throw out of 12 because the defense reacts with base. But if you've got the athletes that you need to at tight end that are really receivers, it can be separators, then you can really create advantages for your offense out of 12 personnel. You give a run look, you throw the football. I think, and I haven't looked at the exact numbers to know, but that is one of the things last year out of 12 personnel with Robbie Utes and CJ Dupree, it gave you almost nothing from a receiving standpoint. So it was there to be a block aid. This year with Josh Cuevas out of 12 personnel, you could get some of that, especially with Caleb Edwards, who is more of a, he's a big Y tight end, but he's a good receiver in that instance. So you had 2 receiving options out of 12 personnel, which is it's all trying to get the defense to react. It's all about identifying personnel packages and how you can exploit that relative, because it's always trying to match the personnel. Like someone will give you a run heavy look. We talked about it last year. Alabama really didn't do that against Vanderbilt. They got a lot of, 13 personnel or 12 personnel or 21 or whatever. And they were electing to really stay in a 4-2-5 regardless. So they weren't doing what I'm talking about. But a lot of times, whether it be on the college or NFL level, it's all about matching personnel. And if you can figure out ways to exploit that from an offense perspective, that will certainly help you. So now that you're more so, like you talk about Caleb Edwards and you talk about Jay Lindsey, that could help your run game, but it's also probably going to be signaling to the defense they're in 12, they're probably running the football. So what I would like to see, I think Pritchett from a receiving standpoint, I think he gives you a little bit more where you can show them the personnel, but then hit them with, throwing the football with both Edwards and Pritchett. I also think Brody Dalton played a pretty good football game on Saturday. I don't know if it could end up being a situation against Auburn where we see up to 4 tight ends. You see Marshall Pritchett, you see Caleb Edwards, you see Jay Lindsey you see Brody Dalton, or I think at bare minimum, you get those first 3 guys. You're going to see a rotation, and I think Marshall Pritchett is going to be involved to some extent. Now, if he gets out there and he's not playing well, they've talked about it's a production-based offense. So they'll pull out, they'll put somebody else in. But he played the most snaps out of any of the tight ends on Saturday. He got the most targets, and I think that was more of let's see what this guy can do because he brings that element more than any other tight end we have. And if we can, we would like to try to replace that element to an extent without having Josh Cuevas.
Yeah, it's just kind of ironic that you lose Cuevas and you end up playing multiple tight ends because Cuevas is gone. You use more of them. It's not just like, okay, well, we'll just replace Cuevas with Pritchett. You can't do that. You can't just replace, okay, everything we're asking of Josh Cuevas, we're just going to ask Marshall Pritchett to do. You can't do that. That's why you got to play more guys. But, a lot of what you said there about, running the ball out of 11 and throwing it out of 12, it reminds me of something Saban was asked recently. And I think he was asked when being asked about Alabama, and I know the last thing Saban wants to do is coach Alabama's football team in the media because that's so unfair to Kalen DeBoer. But so I think Saban answered it in more of a general sense. But I loved his answer. I'm not going to forget it. It was really good. But Saban sort of asked, okay, well, when a team is struggling to run the ball, and you fear that you're getting too one-dimensional, I mean, what can you do to fix the run game? And his answer was, well, and it's not a fix, but what you can do to create a run game is you run the ball when the defense thinks you're going to throw it. I mean, when they've got the personnel because and they think you're going to throw it, when you're in 11 personnel or even 10 personnel, when you're in 10 personnel or 11 personnel, they think you're going to throw it. Run it then, and then when you put in 12. Then when you put in 12 and they're like, well, they're running the ball now, the 2 tight ends, that's when you throw it. And Alabama can afford to do that, by the way. Alabama could play some 12 personnel with 2 blocking tight ends. If you got Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard as your 2 receivers running routes, one of them's going to get open. I mean, you can trust Jerm and Ryan to achieve some level of separation. But the point being, I think that losing Cuevas may get Alabama accidentally a little more creative in tight end usage, which could lead to increased production in the run game. And if Jam's issue, as you pointed out, is health related, now it's been 2 more weeks since Oklahoma. Maybe you get a little bit better Jam than you've gotten, over the last 4 SEC games, maybe. But you also are developing some level of confidence in Daniel Hill. I think Daniel Hill was the leading rusher against Oklahoma in the last SEC game. He only carried the ball twice this weekend against Eastern Illinois. By the way, had the highest yard per carry average amongst the running backs was Daniel Hill. Shouldn't surprise anybody. Now it was only 2 carries, so don't make too much of it. But it's not a surprising number. I think one of my bold predictions for Auburn later this week is a better run game. I'm not going too far with this, but a better run game than we've seen from Alabama since that Vandy, Missouri sort of back-to-back games when Alabama had a bit of a run game. I think Alabama's going to run the ball with some level of success over there. I haven't picked out a yardage number yet, Clint, but I'm thinking it's going to be in that 140 range. If that doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people, before Eastern Illinois, Alabama was averaging 109 yards rushing per game, just 109, the lowest of any of DeBoer's career as a head coach. It was around 109. So actually rushing for 140 against a team, as you pointed out, 11th in the nation against the run. I think rushing for 140 would be a nice achievement. And again, it helps Ty on the receivers.
A couple of things here. Number one, I do think A.K. Deer can be a solution more than I've thought that he could be. A lot of people have been clamoring for him. I understood it because it's like, hey, what you're giving us, we don't see solutions. Maybe A.K. Deer can be that guy. And I thought A.K. Deer looked good on Saturday. It was against Eastern Illinois. Everybody looked good. So just because everybody else has been thrown out against elite run defenses and they haven't had success, and the only sample size you have from A.K. Deer is against Eastern Illinois, it's like, oh man, every time you put him out there, he's doing well. Well, if you only play Daniel Hill against Eastern Illinois, Daniel Hill's going to look really, really good. So my point is you got to understand the context behind it. But what I will say is I thought from him, and they brought it up on the broadcast 567 times, it felt like, but they're right. From a vision standpoint and seeing it, A.K. Deer does that probably better than anybody else in the roster. There was an inside zone run play that I shared on Twitter where the backside tackle completely washes the defensive tackle. I think it was Arkell and Newgum. So you're supposed to read first play side defensive lineman, backside interior defensive lineman as that number 2. And then you're supposed to kind of read based off of that. If the defensive lineman crosses the center's face, your first read, you're going to be cutting it back. If that next defensive lineman is crossing the face, I think of your tackle, your guard, you're going to be cutting back even further. But you've got to get that tackle to be able to wash down. Arkell did that, and A.K. Deer actually saw it, and he was able to make up that cut and then score a touchdown on it. The reason that I say that is it's not going to fix the offensive lineman not sustaining blocks or the tight ends not sustaining blocks, having A.K. Deer out there. It's not. But on those few plays, because sometimes the offensive line and the tight ends do their job, and there is something there. And the running backs, it feels like it's like I've said, it's a combination of factors. When they finally get all their jobs done, the running backs don't see the hole or they don't hit the hole for whatever reason. Fixing just that on those particular plays, you're still going to see A.K. Deer getting tackled at the line of scrimmage or maybe in the backfield or having those negative plays just like everybody else. Because if someone else is not doing their job, he is not like this massive tackle breaker. He can break tackles, but he's not going to be, an elite running back in that sense. But on those few plays, which can end up mattering in a football game where it's blocked correctly, having a running back that sees it better and can actually exploit it. And I think he's got a little bit more, he doesn't have the elite home run hitting ability, but I do think he's got some long speed to him. So having that and maybe getting a little bit more explosiveness out of your run game, He's not Kevin Riley as far as exploding to the second level, but he does have a little bit more explosion than either a Daniel Hill or a Jam Miller. Maybe that would help on some of those. Still think that they're going to stay committed to Jam Miller and Daniel Hill because of the pass protection. And I'm just going to tell you, that's not me saying that they should necessarily. I also don't see it all in practice, so I don't see who's the most consistent amongst that group. But this is a throw first offense. It's how they have won. So it's going to continue to be. If you can't pass protect, you're not nearly as effective as other guys. They're going to play those other guys more than likely. But I will say that I feel like AK Deer can potentially be a solution to a little bit of Alabama's problem in the run game.
Yeah, it's frustrating to me when I hear or read someone say, gosh, it's not good enough with Jam and Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley and AK Deer's a better player than them and he should be out there playing, but they're not going to play a freshman. Well, tell that to Damani Jackson. Tell Damani Jackson that they won't play a freshman. Tell Wilkin Formby that they won't play a freshman.
That's right.
They will play freshmen when they're ready. There's one thing about this staff. I will give them a major shout out. They play a lot of players, and they will play a freshman when he's ready. It doesn't matter that there's a veteran in front of him. So for that reason alone, I think it's fair to guess that the staff doesn't feel that AK Deer is ready. And a running back who's not ready to play, my first thought is always pass protection. Yes. Could be something else. Could be ball security. By the way, they work on that every single day. They work on ball security. They have ball security drills. Maybe the kid, is loose with the ball a little bit or too much for their liking. Could be that. And you're right, stamina. I mean, playing in an SEC football game for 30, 40, 50 snaps is much different than playing in a high school football game for a lot of snaps. So it could be any number of things, catching the ball, running the routes, and not just getting blitzers blocked, knowing who to block, and then getting them blocked. For instance, I know against LSU, one of our backs gave up a big hit, I think a sack fumble on pass protection. And who were they blocking? They're one-on-one trying to block Harold Perkins. I mean, that's a ridiculous ask for a senior running back. And now you're asking an 18-year-old who's never done it in his life, oh, go get Harold Perkins blocked or we might lose the football game. I mean, so that's what sort of has to be addressed before AK Deer is ready to play. But I will say I've seen enough from AK Deer to where I'll say this offseason, and heck, I'm already looking forward to our offseason episodes. But I'll be saying this a lot in the offseason. I'm assuming a lot here, but I think some of these assumptions are fair. Jam's a senior. He's gone. Dre Washington's a senior. He's gone. Based on how little we've seen Richard Young, I think it's not crazy to guess he might end up in the portal. That makes some level of sense. But my point to this is this. As bad as the running game has been, as ineffective as it's been for most of the season, if Alabama is returning Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, and AK Deer, and I'm not even getting to Crowell yet because he's going to have some of the same issues Deer has had. That's what the expectation should be. But if you return Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, and AK Deer, I'm going to feel pretty optimistic about the run game going into next year. Not optimistic in the sense all of a sudden Alabama's going to turn into 95 Nebraska. No, they're not going to do that. They're never going to do that with DeBoer and Grubb running this offense. There'll always be a pass-first group. But I'm going to feel like the production will improve and pieces are in place for Alabama to be much better running the ball next year if those are your first three guys that will get off the bus this spring.
Yeah, and it's like I said, I mean, if you bring on AK Deer and you're getting the vision and stuff, and I would fully expect the offensive line to continue to make improvement. I really do. I understand that we've been saying that every offseason. We've been saying that every year. It's going to get better next year. It's going to get better next year. But people's also going to understand there was such this up and down. They started getting smaller on the offensive line. Then they started getting bigger again. Then you hire Kalen DeBoer, and now they're getting smaller. But at the same time, now you've got this, okay, the experience are the bigger guys still. And so you're battling experience versus fit. I think that's been a problem. So I do think as they get more of Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's guys in, I do think that the product gets better. They'll be able to run more of what they want to run. They'll be more comfortable with that. And, something to think about when it comes to the run game that I think has also impacted things. It is the lack of a vertical passing game. And I think that's affected the intermediate with Ty. I think that's affected to an extent the short passing game with Ty. But I think the not having the vertical passing game is more so obviously affected the run game than anything else. You've got to think, like, by the time SEC play got underway, Kirby's thinking about this Alabama offense and they're game planning for it. And you're saying they're getting Jam Miller back. We know he's a talented dude. We feel like their run game is going to improve. And it did. It did for 3 weeks prior to Jam Miller getting banged up or getting the concussion. So they're looking at it and they're saying they're probably going to be able to run the football more effectively than they have been without Jam Miller. They're also looking at it and saying Alabama's passing game, especially the last 2 games against ULM and Wisconsin, they've been throwing the football all over the place. Haven't really done it vertical. They haven't had to do it vertical. But what has Ty Simpson put on tape that makes you think that he can't throw the vertical ball to that point? He hadn't. Right. And you know that Kalen DeBoer and Ron Grubb's offense historically want to press you vertically. They want to be a deep shot offense that complements a lot of what else they do. So the run game through that, I mean, we talked about there's all these different elements that could be factoring in. Is it Jam's health? Is it Danny Lewis playing in some of those games? Is it the fact that back then defenses, even Kirby Smart are saying they should be able to run the football more effectively than they have been, and they do have a vertical passing game that they just haven't had to pull out yet. Then as things have gone on, especially post-Missouri, Alabama, I don't think it's a coincidence that Alabama really starts to struggle running the football. And then teams are also figuring out Alabama can't throw the football deep. And then Ty Simpson and everything he was doing early on when those were actual threats really starts to diminish. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think all of this is working together. Now, what I will say is Ty Simpson has been turning the football over too much. I think he got caught with a robber. I think it was cover one robber, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back and look again. But on that first interception, I want to say the underneath robber is what got him. The second one, don't count it. Do not count it. It's a vertical shot to the end zone before halftime. Don't count that against him whatsoever. But he also threw a ball he probably shouldn't have thrown, and he's got to avoid that. He's put the football on the ground. He's turned the football over at a much higher rate as of late, and that is hurting Alabama in some of these close football games. So, Jimmy, I mean, do you agree? And B, what do you think Alabama does to maybe remedy some of these situations?
Of course, I agree. I definitely agree with turning over the ball too much and the fact that second interception is just silly. I mean, you can't even count. That's almost crazy that goes down as an interception to me. It just shows how raw numbers themselves, they lack context. They lack context. And that second interception shouldn't matter to anybody. But the first interception was a real thing. I mean, I think it was a good play on the Panthers' part. I mean, the kid actually made a good play. I mean, those aren't stiffs. I mean, these are college football players out there, and they're capable of a lot. And the linebackers made an unbelievable leaping catch there. But Ty's turned over the ball. He at least did interrupt his 5-game streak of a fumble. He's fumbled more in 2025 than Jalen Milroe did in 2024. That's pretty stunning, particularly when you consider that Milroe was also running the ball through traffic multiple times a game that Ty doesn't do. And Milroe still had fewer fumbles than Ty. So it's an issue. It's a problem. Now, what can we do to minimize that? Because, I mean, the first thing I'll scream out loud before Saturday gets here is if you're minus in the giveaway takeaway number at Auburn, big trouble. It might even be, as Josh Pate calls it, the padlock stat. I mean, if Auburn forces turnovers more than Alabama's able to force against them, that's the first sign of real trouble. Now, I think here's why I feel fairly good about Ty going into Saturday, which I know might surprise people, but because Ty, like you said, I think you used the word diminished. I agree. I mean, his production has cratered a bit. How much of that was the good defenses when you played LSU and South Carolina back to back? I mean, LSU and Oklahoma back to back. I mean, those are just premier defenses. You got to give them a lot of credit for their ability to affect Ty. But If I was doing the psychology job on Ty this week, I would have him go back and spend a lot of time watching Georgia tape again, just simply because as hard as Saturday is going to be, and it's going to be hard, the atmosphere, the environment, the defense you're going up against, season on the line, it's going to be hard. But you know what? It won't be as hard as Georgia. That's also a very difficult atmosphere and environment. And let's be honest, a better football team than Auburn. And Ty was able to go into Athens and play well and win and not turn the ball over, to the extent that it would cost you to lose the game. I think Ty needs to get that Athens feeling back. You can do that by watching some tape and reminding yourself, I have not just survived this in the past, I've thrived in it. And that's what he needs to be reminded of, because I think it's easy when you feel like you're not playing well to try to pull yourself out of it by doing too much. What happens then? You turn the ball over when you're trying to do too much. I also think there's too much criticism for the Eastern Illinois when, I think that second interception, some people are holding it against him for some reason. They're looking at that stat line.
Yeah.
Realize this, Ty was 11 of 16. So that's only 5 incompletions. 2 of them were the interceptions. 1 of them shouldn't really count. So only 3.
Ryan dropped one.
Ryan dropped one or dropped a catchable ball.
Catchable, yeah.
A catchable ball. So other than that, only 2 balls hit the ground. It really wasn't that bad. I think people just expected Louisiana Monroe. I know I did. I even talked about it last week about how, against Louisiana Monroe was 17 for 17. And that's what I wanted to see out of him, was that sort of efficiency. I didn't care so much about the overall numbers and the playmaking so much as the efficiency. And maybe that was just slightly lacking compared to Louisiana Monroe 17 of 17. But Ty, it's not 11 of 16, 5 incompletions, 2 of them interceptions. 1 of them shouldn't count. Another ball that could have been caught by Ryan. I don't think Saturday was that bad. So we'll see. I'm just optimistic that Ty can play well at Auburn, because we've seen him play well on the road, even against a Georgia. So I don't think that we've seen the end of Ty Simpson playing well in 2025. I don't believe that at all.
Yeah, I mean, and part of me, I said this after the game, part of me is more encouraged about Ty going into Jordan-Hare Stadium this weekend after what I saw on Saturday than maybe if he would have gone out there and thrown for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Fool's gold. In other words, it could have been
correct.
Some fool's gold.
That would have told me they're really worried about getting his confidence back on track, because I thought that he needed to get his confidence back on track. The fact that they didn't take that opportunity. The 2 teams, Eastern Illinois ran the ball 30 times. They threw the ball 9. Alabama ran the ball 49 times on 79 plays. Collectively, 66.9%. So 2/3 of the plays run on Saturday were run plays. That is a third. Both teams just said, Eastern Illinois said, let's shorten this game. Alabama said, let's get some practice in. We need to help with the run game. Also, let's shorten this game. Let's not get anybody hurt. Let's get these guys out there, get them some practice reps. And you saw, like, when Keelan Russell came in, they threw the football around. Austin Mack, when he was out there, I mean, I don't even know how many plays he played. I feel like it wasn't a ton, but he got to attempt some passes.
5. I think he was 5 for 5, and Keelan was 7 of 9.
Right? So let's see how many snaps they played. Yeah, Austin Mack played 13 snaps, and he threw the ball 5 times. Keelan Russell, he attempted 9 passes on 24, and Ty on 40 attempted 16 passes. So I know that those rates, I mean.
So you're saying is they weren't making a concerted effort to Ty to throw his way out of a slump. They didn't even do that, meaning that they didn't feel like he needed that.
Correct. Exactly. And that's where I think the difference is between the way that the fans feel, because I kind of said, I think what they were doing, they didn't view losing to 2 points against a college football playoff team, when you lose a fluky game, losing the turnover battle 3-0, which is not going to happen that often. It'd be that lopsided. And if you take away any of those 1 turnovers, Alabama probably wins that game. Even if you lose the turnover battle 2-0, you probably win that game. So I don't think they have panic over the Oklahoma law. There was a panic after Florida State, and they said, we got to get Ty's confidence up. Like, we got to get this quarterback position going because it is critical to this offense. Don't feel like they approach this game nearly the same way. So my point in saying that is I think that, granted, not, a lot of people are like, they should have used it as an opportunity to get the vertical passing game going. I think that they want Auburn. I mean, it's kind of like in certain spring games, maybe 2017 with Tua. No, probably 2018 after Tua had done what he had done in the national championship. And it was that quarterback battle between Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. I want to say that watching that spring game, there wasn't the offensive fireworks that everybody was expecting because it was a practice. And Nick Saban, I don't think he wanted to put a whole lot on tape in a spring game that was still televised at that time for teams to look at and say, this is what Alabama's going to be. And yet Tua goes out there, doesn't throw just a ton of passes that season, but he was in Heisman contention until the end of the year when he got banged up multiple times. And so I think that's a little bit of here where they're like, we don't have any interest in giving Auburn anything. We're not worried about building confidence. We're worried about not putting anything on tape. Let's run the football. Let's get out of here. We're going to work on some things we need to work on, get a bunch of different guys reps, get some evaluation opportunities on some of that. But what I will say is that I understand that Ty is he is struggling relative to earlier in the season. So I'm not trying to say, oh, he's fine and he's the same player, but I think that it's like, what are you making defenses defend? And they don't really have to. It's not that they don't have to defend the run. You're not making defenses commit a lot of bodies to stopping the run. Like, they're able to do it with limited bodies. That to me is the biggest problem right now. And you don't have a vertical passing game. Maybe that gets going against Auburn. Maybe they come out and they sling some stuff and they connect on it. I don't know. But I think that, like, right now, they're not making defenses defend a whole lot, except for the trickery, which has continued to be a thing. And I think they felt like they needed some of that trickery to get through. And it's something else that keeps they threw a pass to Caden Proctor against Eastern Illinois. Why did they do that? They wanted Auburn to see it. And say, don't forget about this. You need to waste some time worrying about this in practice.
It's not always going to be a decoy.
That's right.
Not always going to be a decoy.
So it was reminding them, you don't do that you do that against Auburn if you want to catch Auburn off guard or think, oh, we've gotten away from it for a while. I don't think that the Proctor thing, maybe there might be something that they do with him, but I think that the fact that they did that against Eastern Illinois, I think that was more so to say, this is just something else for Auburn's defense to have to prepare for. What could they do off of this? Because it's not just everybody thinks, oh, it's just defending that one play. No. What is Alabama going to try to do off of this to make us think that that's coming? And then they've got something else. So now you're brainstorming and you're coming up with different things. If you were an offensive coordinator, what would you be doing off of this and different ways that they use him? But I think so. I like that. And that's something that defenses, have to prepare for. But I think the one thing, and I understand why they're not doing it because they want to keep Ty Simpson healthy, but I think you've got to get his legs more involved. Like the running backs last year, when you look at the actual production, let's see. Last year, the running backs, they averaged 19 carries a game in SEC play. They totaled 598 yards in SEC play in 8 games, which was 74.8 yards per game. They averaged 3.93 yards per carry. And this is amongst Justice Haynes and Jam Miller because they were the run game outside of Jalen Milroe. And then they had 9 touchdowns. So that was just between the running backs. That's not including Jalen Milroe's numbers. This year in 7 SEC games, the running backs have gotten 160 carries, so only 8 more carries and 1 fewer game, but that's 22.9 carries per game, which is, roughly about 4 more than what they were getting last year. They have totaled 555 rushing yards, averaging 79.3 per game, so only about 5 more per game. They're averaging 3.5 yards per carry, and they have 6 total rushing touchdowns. Now, I included Daniel Hill, Jam Miller, and Kevin Riley because at various points, Riley has been involved. Last year was 2 guys, this year it's 3. But my point in saying that is the run game the last 2 years has not been great, but they were averaging almost half a yard carry better in SEC play last year, and that was without Jalen Milroe and his legs. I think there's something about adding that +1 element to the run game and forcing defenses to defend that will open things up for your running backs a little bit more. So if you're struggling in some of these other areas, make defenses have to account for more. I think Ty Simpson's legs can be a bigger part of that, is my point.
Yeah, Milroe had to deal with a spy. I mean, you just didn't play Alabama last year without putting a spy on Jalen Milroe. There's no spy on Ty Simpson. So therefore, it could be there. It, quote, should be there. And I do think that Ty's legs is a feature that's available to Alabama that's just been sort of largely unused. And I get why. He's got to stay healthy for the season to be a success. But now, whether the season is a success or not is going to be defined by what happens Saturday.
That's right.
And I can certainly fall into hyperbole. I know people listen to me all the time probably have realized that I can be hyperbolic at times, not all the time, at times. But this is just how I feel about Saturday to me, Clint. It's like I think this season under Kalen DeBoer in year 2 is a success if they make the playoff. And I don't know that advancing in the playoff is necessary to change what success means. I think success is making the playoff. But if you don't make the playoff, especially in a year where starting in late September, it looked like you would or could, if you don't make the playoff and now you've gone 2 years without being in a 12-team playoff, it's going to be noisy. Now, I don't think it's going to be noisy from the administration. I don't expect it's the last thing I expect, actually, is the administration to make some sort of coaching change. That's not going to happen. But the fan frustration is going to be really noisy. It's going to be a noisy, pretty miserable, loud off season in terms of the fans being disgruntled. That's what to me is on the line Saturday. One game that determines, is this season a success or is this season a bit disastrous? That's a lot. And for as much as I say, I don't remember an Auburn game being like this, an answer that I get when I bring that up is 2013. Well, if Alabama didn't win the game in 2013, and they didn't, we know what happened with the Chris Davis thing. I don't even want to say what other people call that game. First of all, it wasn't a disaster for Nick Saban not to win 3 national titles in a row. Disappointing, sure. But a disaster? Were we going to talk about firing Saban for 8 months because they lost the 2013 game? No. And by the way, that Auburn team was really good. They freaking played for the national championship. They lost, but they played for the national championship. That was a really good Auburn team. This Auburn team's 5-6. I think that this is much different than the 2013 game. It's got the same sort of thing on the line for Alabama. Postseason play, all your goals in front of you, season of success if you win. But it's a much different Auburn team, much different. And it's not Nick Saban trying to win 3 national championships in a row. It's Kalen DeBoer, frankly, trying to justify his hiring, really. I mean, yeah. So I know there might be some hyperbole for some people. I don't think so. I think that's just a stark assessment of what this game is. And I hate that it's built up to that level, but it just is. It's a success or disastrous based on the outcome.
Yeah, when you look at, Nick Saban, he never had the 12-team playoff, and he missed the college football playoffs twice, in 2019 and in 2022. So he was getting there every year, and he was winning national championships. And that's when there was only 4 available. Not saying he wouldn't be dealing with similar things now in the changing landscape of college football. It's Kalen DeBoer. But what I am saying is that when it gets expanded to 12, and now you've got 8 more chances to get in, or 8 more spots to get in, and you start off 0-2 as Alabama's head coach, that's going to create some noise amongst fans. You're going to hear that a ton in the offseason amongst fans. So, while all of this to an extent is understandable, I agree with you. I think that you need to make the college football playoff. And if you end up, I'll put it this way, I think the coaching staff, they don't know what the committee would do. I don't know how much, if you go to the SEC championship and you lose the SEC championship, I don't know if that's really going to affect you one way or another as far as the college football playoff. I've said, I think a 10-2 Alabama that misses the SEC championship could get left out just about to the same extent that a 10-3 SEC runner-up that makes it to the SEC championship, Alabama could I think the chances are pretty similar. Now, if you obviously you would feel like Ty Simpson being healthy would be your best option to win the SEC, which will guarantee you a spot in the college football playoff. But my point is that this is a must-win game against Auburn. Run him a little bit. If he ends up getting banged up, then that's not good. Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, this is the have to win one.
This is the have to.
And then, you probably don't want to lose the SEC championship because you guarantee yourself in, but it's also still very possible that even if you drop that game, if you can just get there, it's very possible that you get in. But then after the SEC championship, you'd have some time. So if it's like a nicked up ankle or it's something that's, minor, a concussion, if that's what you're worried about, like he would have plenty of time to get back on the field, get the practice reps in, and be ready to rock and roll for the college football playoff. I'm not saying like run this guy 12 times, 15 times. I'm saying just, get him 6-7 carries. And I'm talking about true carries. Now, granted, maybe 4 or 5 true carries and then some scrambles and encourage him more that, hey, instead of forcing some of these things when you're off, with some of your, mechanics and accuracy and stuff right now in certain situations, if lanes present themselves, running lanes, step up and take off. It's more of encouraging that type of situation. We'll have to wait and see if that ends up happening, and they're probably not going to listen to me. They'll probably stick with what they've been doing up to this point. But I just think that would be something else that opposing defenses would have to defend, and that first team that you do that against, I don't think they're going to be really ready for it. So this weekend would be a great time to kind of polish that off a little bit. Once again, not saying give this guy massive volume, Jalen Milroe volume, but just throw it in a little bit more than we've seen up to this point. What I will say, though, is once again, I think that this coaching staff in these really big must-have types of games, not the really big, you're playing the 6-6 Oklahoma and Norman, that was a must-have too. If you dropped that game, you weren't going to the playoffs more than likely. But that wasn't viewed as a must-have going in. Alabama was expected to win it. This is one of those where a lot of people were saying, like, it's a must-have. I understand Auburn is sub 500. They actually have a worse record than Oklahoma finished with last year, but they are really tough defensively. That place it's a very tough environment to play, and it's a relatively small spread. So Vegas doesn't think that Alabama's going into Jordan Hare and blowing them out and stuff. So my point is, I think that this coaching staff is going to have a game plan dialed up, and I think the limited that we saw against Eastern Illinois kind of points to that, because in the past, it was hard to get me to admit that Nick Saban or anybody on his staff was quote unquote looking ahead to the next opponent. I don't believe that's the case with this current staff. They played QB Reese on the second drive of the game. They knew this one was in the bag. They had zero concerns whatsoever. Even if they played their D- game, they knew they were winning the football game, and they were probably winning the football game very handedly. So in my opinion, did you sit and just take the week off? No. What did you do? You started looking ahead to Auburn. So I think with that, I would fully expect a really good game plan. Do the players go out there and execute it? Does some fluky things happen? Does Alabama still lose? I can't tell you any of those things. But I think the both coaching staffs, the offensive and defensive, they feel pretty good. I would be pretty confident saying they feel pretty good about their game plans going into Saturday.
Yeah, that's a great point you make about how good DeBoer's been in the big game, and this is the big game. It's not comparable to losing to 500 teams like Vanderbilt and Oklahoma a year ago. It's not comparable to that at all. It's a big game with careers on the line and seasons on the line, and a good football team. I know that there will be a lot of talk about Auburn being 5-6, and no team that has a 5-6 record generally has success in this game. That's been true over the years. But you know what? I was really doing some work on Auburn this morning, and we'll do a whole Auburn show next on the next show. But I believe this is true. All the Auburn games have been pretty close. No one has shown up and just beat the crap out of Auburn. I mean, that hasn't happened. They've been in every game. They were basically beat Georgia for the first half. Before that second half was pretty bad. But I think, had they played Ashton Daniels and Deuce Knight all year with DJ Durkin as the head coach, I don't think Auburn would be 5-6. I'm not sitting here. I'm sure some Auburn fan thinks they'd be 10-1. No, you wouldn't be. You wouldn't even be 9-2. You probably wouldn't even be 8-3, but you wouldn't be 5-6. I'll grant you that. I mean, I do ascribe some of Auburn's losses to Hugh Freeze and playing the wrong quarterback. That's probably true. So I don't think you're playing a 5-6 Auburn team. I think you're probably playing something more like a 7-4 Auburn team. I mean, that's the way I look at them. I think they're just better than their record now that they've made a change at head coach, now that they've made the changes at quarterback, now that they've made the changes at OC, because I think Derek Nix is doing just a better job with the offense than Hugh Freeze did. Now, that being said, the sample size is too small. Vanderbilt is not great on defense. And, of course, Mercer is still an FBS team similar to Eastern Illinois. So don't make too much of that. As a matter of fact, I did some digging. I think people might be surprised to hear these numbers. Ashton Daniels played quite a bit at Stanford. For those unaware, he played quite a bit at Stanford. I know they're making a bunch of, they're really, heck, he played so good against Vanderbilt, they held him out so they could redshirt him and get him a whole nother year. That's how excited they are about what he did at Vanderbilt. He was a starting quarterback at Stanford as a sophomore, and he played a lot as a junior until he lost the job. But in substantial playing time at Stanford, 21 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. Less than 7 yards per attempt in his career. 60% completion percentage. These numbers are not good. That's why he lost the job at Stanford and why he left. 21 touchdowns, 20 interceptions, 6.8 yards, I think, per attempt in over 2 seasons of basically being the starter, and only a 60% completion percentage. And look who Stanford plays. They ain't playing SEC defenses. So I look at those numbers and not just what he did at Vanderbilt. It's hard to believe that he could put up those numbers at Stanford, arrive at Auburn, and all of a sudden he's this Heisman, mountain of production. It's kind of hard for me to believe. But nevertheless, I do agree that Auburn is a better football team with Ashton Daniels and Deuce Knight than they were with Jackson Arnold.
We talked a lot about, hey, Alabama, if you keep playing all these close games and stuff each and every week, at some point, you're probably going to drop one. I mean, it's just you're playing with fire each and every week. Auburn's the exact opposite. Hey, you're playing close games each and every week. Eventually, you're going to luck up and win one of these things. And they lost by 7 to Oklahoma, playoff team right now.
Yep.
They lost by 6 to Texas A&M, playoff team. They lost by 10, winning at halftime to Georgia, playoff team. They lost in 2 overtimes by 6 to Missouri, borderline top 25, obviously dropped out, but they are a good football team.
They're
obviously battled Alabama too. They lost 10-3 against Kentucky. That was a bad one. Kentucky's been better than we thought they were going to be though this year. They really have. I thought they were going to be more of like a 2-3 win team max. They've got the potential to be bowl eligible.
Their season bottomed out against Kentucky, and at the same time, they only gave up 10 points in 60 minutes.
That's right. Great point. And then they lose in overtime by 7 to Vanderbilt, a college football playoff contender. So of all of their losses, one of them was to a good, not great Missouri team. One of them was to Kentucky, who's not a very good football team. They're better than we were expecting, but you're not going to call them a good football team. And then the rest of them, the other 4, have come against either playoff or playoff contenders, contending teams. And so, like, at some point, if you keep playing these close games, you're going to luck up and win one. Alabama, not saying it's not going to be a close game, but they need to be weary of that, is my entire point. And if they don't understand that, like, Auburn has this belief right now under DJ Durkin. They did not play a good game at all against Mercer. Everybody else, and especially to start the game, they ended up winning 62-17. But I mean, at one point, I think Mercer was up like 20-17, something like that. Excuse me, I guess 17-14, maybe.
Auburn was up 17-14.
Okay.
Auburn was up 17-14, and then Auburn scored, and then Mercer scored 3 points later. But it was 17-14 well into the game. I mean, they didn't come out of the gate beating up Mercer. I mean, they would throughout the second half. But
yeah, to start the second quarter, it was 14-14. Auburn got up 21-14, but then with like right before halftime, about 3 or 4 minutes before, is when they kicked the field goal and they made it 21-17. So they were only down 4 points. When I'm seeing that, I'm thinking the exact same thing as I am about Alabama, which is they were looking ahead. they have proven that they're willing to look ahead. They've done that in years past. It's why these 6-6
By not
Auburn
playing
teams.
the starting quarterback, they were looking ahead.
Great point.
Nick
Great
Saban
point.
would never have done that in a million trillion years. Like,
great point, man.
Take a team so lightly that we're not even going to start our starting quarterback. We're not going to play him because we're more concerned about Alabama.
Reserve the red shirt. Where
Yeah.
there that it wasn't like, oh, he's hobbled a little bit. Oh, if this was LSU, he'd play. But no, it's Mercer, so we're going to hold him out. No, this was them saying we just want to have this guy an extra season, and we know we're beating Mercer. So if you thought that going in, you were preparing for Alabama for the last 2 weeks as well.
And started the true freshman at quarterback instead of Jackson Arnold, who'd started 8 or 9 games. To me, and I'm on the outside looking in. I mean, I don't know Auburn like I know Alabama, but to me, that was like number one priority, make sure Ashton Daniels can play college football, maybe for us next year. Number 2, keep Deuce Knight out of the transfer portal. We're going to start him. We could care less how mad Jackson Arnold is. He's out of here anyway.
That's exactly right. And now a bunch of Auburn fans are like, oh, man, this guy's so good, great, and wonderful. Completed 75% of his passes, averaged 12 yards an attempt, 2 touchdowns, 240 yards roughly. And then he had 162 yards on 9 carries and 4 touchdowns on the ground. It's Mercer. Once again, it's like what we're talking about with, you've got to take the opponent into account. But at the same time, I do really think that it's going to be an interesting game. We have not even started to scratch the surface as far as the coverage of it. Like, we just really were talking about Alabama and the run game and didn't really talk about the defense a lot. And I will say, after the fact, I was thinking back to my post game, and I'm sure that you guys did a much better job than I did on Locked On. But I regretted the fact that I didn't give the defense a lot more credit for their performance, because that's as close to a flawless game of football as you could possibly play. I'm telling you that just, you couldn't have asked any. I understand it's the opponent, but I'm saying when you're chasing the perfect game on defense, that's about as close as it gets. I mean, they were dominant from start to finish, and it didn't matter who was out there. That tells you the opponent was that bad, but give them a lot of credit for that. I didn't do that nearly well enough on Saturday after the game, so definitely wanted to do that here. And then, we're just spend just a minute on it, and we've already gone extremely long. I'm not going to hold you here, hostage much longer, but I did want to at least get your concerns on the kicking game, because that's something that a lot of people want to talk about, and you've seen it all over social media. Bama fans are like, this Auburn Iron Bowl, we just know it's going to come down to a game-winning kick for Connor Talty. Like, what are your thoughts on what you saw from him, what you saw from fans, and what you think about this kicking game moving forward?
Yeah, I didn't like the boos, because I mean, what's that fixing? I mean, are y'all trying to bring it to the attention of the staff that the kicking game's not good enough? they're aware. They're very aware. I think, first of all, you got to coach the game like it's not going to come down to a kick. I mean, don't let it come down to. Don't let it come down to a kick. Now, what Jay Nunez and the special team staff needs to work on is, if it does come down to a kick, make it. That's what they've got to work on this week. You got to be almost more psychologist than kicking coach this week. You got to get the kid in a headspace to where he's able to trot out there and make the kick at the end to win it. Clint went over how close the Auburn games have been. Alabama games have been close too. It will be shocking to me if this game is not somewhat close. It will be shocking because all the Auburn games have been close. All the Alabama games have been close against SEC teams generally. So I'm expecting it to be close. You got to put Connor in a headspace where he's able to make the kick. Have confidence in the snap and the hold. I know he missed one this past week. Keep in mind, he actually has made more kicks than he's missed. Let's remember that. I'm not bragging on the numbers. The numbers aren't good. But he's made more than he's missed. So trust that he can do it. But at the same time, hey, when it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, I think you've got to coach the game so it doesn't come down to the kicks. But at the same time, Jay Nunez, get him ready to make the kick. It could come down to that. And then it's time to be a hero. Hey, Connor, you make the kick against Auburn, everything else is forgotten. Everything else is forgotten. It's flushed. It's gone. So you got a chance to erase the bad kicks at Jordan Hare. I would look at it like, I would start with him in terms of fixing him psychologically. Start with that. This is an opportunity to fix everything that's gone wrong. You can fix it all Saturday. You need to be looking forward to that opportunity. One final thing I'll say is a buddy of mine used to kick at Alabama, and every now and then, I talk with him, and I remember one thing he's told me I've never forgotten about the mentality of a kicker. These guys are harder to find than you think, and that have this mentality. They want it to come down to them. They want it on them. They live for it. Like, please put it on me. So few guys like that, and I don't know that our kicker's in that headspace right now. Especially, that's what has to be fixed. But when you're out recruiting, that's what you're looking for. The guy that wants it on him, no different than the basketball player when they're drawing up the play at the end, the one that's looking at the coach, begging him for the ball. Give me the ball.
Yeah,
that's what you want in a kicker. It's harder to find than you think.
I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, at the end of that South Carolina game, I didn't believe. I was scared to death if it came down to Connor Talty. I was so glad they scored that touchdown because they were showing him on the sidelines. I'm like, he's missing this. I can just tell. And I hate saying that. And I didn't say that publicly. Like, I didn't jump on Twitter and be like, uh-oh. But I was definitely just seeing him. I was like, I'm not confident at all. Now,
I agree.
What I will say, though, is I didn't disagree with no. I take that back. I understood the booing directly after the missed kick. There's a lot of frustrations. A lot of fans were frustrated about the week before, him jumping on the long snapper like he did.
Yep.
I understood that. I kind of, and at first it really kind of rubbed me the wrong way how he kind of did the whole, he did the hand thing, like bring it on after he missed it. Kind of, I don't know if you saw that, but where it was very quick and small, but it's almost like he was doing his hands like, come on, boo me. Like, and to me, I started thinking about like, well, I mean, he's probably saying, I deserve it. Like, go ahead and boo me. Like, I earned that. A lot of fans didn't like that. It kind of rubbed them the wrong way too. That's probably why the booing continued. But the second that before he even goes to attempt an extra point, you're now booing him as he's coming onto the field. That is where I had the problem. And I'm not saying I'm not saying, oh, Talty didn't deserve that. I'm saying it's a really, really, really bad look. And other people, they're not looking at it and saying, oh, well, Talty's missed kicks all week for this team, and so the fan base is going to be frustrated. They're going to look and say, that is a guy who hadn't even missed, like he had missed earlier, but you're letting that linger and you're not supporting your guy. That's I'm telling you, it's not a good look. Not saying it's not understandable. I'm saying it's not a good look for Alabama, whether it be from a recruiting standpoint or anything else. If he goes into Jordan-Hare Stadium and there ends up being a situation where he has to kick at all, if he makes it, you better hear however many fans, Alabama fans in there, if there's 15, 20,000, I don't even know how many there can be in there, but it better sound like Bryant Denny at home. Yeah. You better go absolutely buck wild, because that will not only be a big deal, but it will also be a situation where maybe you can really start to get his confidence up, because I do think Alabama's going to need him, whether it's in the Iron Bowl, the SEC championship, or the college football playoffs, depending on how far Alabama goes. They're going to need him at multiple points this season. There's no doubt in my mind.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Like I said, and the game's going to be close. It could so easily come down to a kick. You've got to do what you can to put him in a headspace where he's going to make the kick. But at the same time, coach the game in a way to where you're somewhat trying to avoid it. Now, hey, if it's a 28-yard kick and it's 4th and 7,
right?
Trust that he's going to make the kick.
Right.
And again, he's made more than he's missed. It's not like he's. I mean, I just hate when it goes wrong, and now we act like he's 0 for 18. That's just not even remotely true. And frankly, they tried a lot of kickers, and you can't evaluate them all on this. But in terms of who was kicking the prettiest, most professional looking extra points, it was Connor Talty.
It wasn't close either.
Talty's got the leg. That's why he was the kickoff guy last year. He's got more leg than the other guys have. It's just about harnessing it, being accurate. Yes, the snaps had been an issue. That is true. That's true. The snaps have been an issue. But ultimately, it comes down to this. It's Connor Talty's name on the door. Whenever you got a snapper and a holder and a kicker, the kicker is going to get all the praise and all the blame. That's how that works. And Connor's got to accept that. And I don't know that he'd accepted that as he should have.
Everybody on the team, they saw, whether they saw it live or not, they saw what the TV showed. They saw him go off on his long snapper.
Yep.
Every one of them after that kick against Eastern Illinois, not every teammate, but there were coaches, there were teammates all going over there to him, showing him support. And you've been having players post on social media saying the booing thing wasn't cool. That they know the whole situation. They know all of it. And so if they're choosing to continue to support him and they've got his back, I mean, maybe we just don't have all the information. Not saying that that's 100% accurate, but it's possible. So at least
the last thing I'll point out when Connor, again, I'm not excusing. I thought what he did was shameful. Actually, calling as a long snapper on the field, that was shameful. But we'll say this: you know what happened after that kick? They replaced the long snapper. They didn't replace the kicker. They replaced the snapper, not the kicker. So that doesn't excuse what Connor did, but it is the coaching staff telling everyone what they identified as the problem.
And when he missed the kick against Eastern Illinois, you still didn't see somebody else. That was like, I was like, if there was ever a time this season to put another kicker out there, that was the moment. They didn't do that. It told us everything we needed to know.
And they didn't turn it over to Notaro, who was the number 2 kicker. They didn't turn it over to him. They kicked what Notaro kicked, Schuback kicked. I think another guy kicked. They had like 3 or 4 kickers.
Talty was out there for the very next extra point. He was not. So that was, to me, that was them sending everybody a message, because they had planned to rotate, but that very next one, they said, we're going to make a statement. We're putting Talty back out there. He puts out there, he hits it, and then they start rotating. And that way everybody, a lot of people were like, oh, see, now they're trying no, they were letting, once again, QB Reese played on the second drive of the game. Like they were throwing everybody.
5 quarterbacks. They even played 2 walk-on quarterbacks. So
that's right.
So it had nothing to do with benching Talty. Talty will be the kicker against Auburn, and we'll see what happens with the long snap job. But anyway, you do have to coach. In my opinion, DeBoer has to coach the game, sort of avoiding kicks.
Right, you're right.
But hey, DeBoer likes to go for it on 4th down anyway. It's not like it's going to be new. He likes to go for it on 4th down.
That in fact, I think it's their comfort zone. I think a lot of times analytics supports going for it on 4th, but that will also, being in manageable situations will become all the more critical to give you the opportunity where you can. Because if it's 4th and 7, they're not. So, all right, man, that's going to do it for today's show. It's gone extremely long. We made it 1. Hope people don't mind. I thought it was good conversation. We'll definitely be continuing on and talking more about Auburn as the week progresses. We appreciate everybody who has been here. Get on over to roadback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon.